Ni hao.
Konnichiwa.
Shalom.
Ciao.
Bonjour.
Namaste.
Jumbo.
Bienvenidos, my friends. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. My name's Jedley, and I am beaming out to you in the entire universe from the beautiful, book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. You know, I really believe that magic happens when we share stories together. When a child sits down with a parent, grandparent, teacher, opens a book, hearts connect, imaginations grow, and love shines brighter. Today we're going to meet some great creators that are going to inspire you and your child. Please help us grow our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Audible, Amazon Music, YouTube. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Great guest today. You are going to be inspired. First up, Pam Allyn. She is the creator of World Read Aloud Day. She is here to celebrate every child a super reader. Later in the show, Ashley Bendixson is here to celebrate a kid's book about boundaries. Hey, for all the authors that are listening out there, I wanted to share with you this great email that we received here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast from Dr. Linda Mubarak. She is a past guest and the author of Maxine's New Job. Here's the email. Dear Pam and Jed, good news! Maxine's New Job has been nominated to receive the prestigious Henri Award at the 2018 Christian Literacy Awards for Outstanding Literacy Work in the Children's Book Division. I sincerely believe your certifying Maxine as a great read helped bring increased social media attention to the book. Thank you for the exposure and the great marketing. We are so happy for Dr. Linda Mubarak that her book, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read, Maxine's New Job, received this prestigious recognition. We would love to help your book receive that same kind of recognition. If you are interested in having your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the contact button, send us a note, and we'll send all the information back to you, or you can go right to our Certified Great Read page on our website. It's fun, it's easy, and it is really an effective way to let the world know that your book stands out above all the rest. The Reading with the Kids Certified Great Read program. My friends, I am so honored. I have so many amazing guests, and today is no exception. Our guest is here today to celebrate. Her book is called Every Child a Super Reader. Please welcome back to the show the creator of World Read Aloud Day, Pam Allyn. Pam, welcome back.
Thanks, Jed. Thanks so much for having me, and I love your podcast, and so glad to be here.
Thank you. So you love my podcast. All right, that's all we need to hear right now.
We're done.
So every child a super reader. You know, I've learned so much doing this podcast. You know, I was just when I started as a dopey guy, knowing that, you know, the relationship I have with my adult kids was built on reading, and my relationship is great. I love it. It's the greatest thing I did is raise two amazing kids. And that's what I want to tell parents. Hey, it's simple. It's so simple, and it's so wonderful, and it's the best thing you can do for your kids and yourself. But boy, there are so many other benefits that our kids get and that we get when we spend time with them and help create super readers.
Oh, I mean, it's just an extraordinary gift that we can give to our children. And I think you just hit the nail on the head, and I love that you started with that. This idea of the relationship building part of the read aloud and reading together, as opposed to my child is learning to read, and then as soon as they learn to read, they go off by themselves and they can do it on their own. That you immediately, started the conversation by saying you consider that as one of the building blocks to raising wonderful children, and especially that you feel that you have this amazing relationship with them and feeling of love and trust and bond. And that to me is a kind of the essence of reading and maybe the essence of why Ernest Morel and I wrote the book, Every Child is Super Reader, because we wanted to really reinforce the idea that young people, they live on relationships. I mean, the world is very complicated, a very complex place for children and teenagers to navigate. And reading with them from the youngest ages is a way to say, I'm here for you. I believe in you. I want to have a conversation with you. It's like sending all kinds of unbelievably great messages. And then on top of that is the fact that when you read to children, you're actually also going to increase their academic potential in school, which is a whole other amazing benefit to reading with your children at home.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to give a tip of the cap to my daughter's second grade teacher. I remember it so clearly. I was kind of bummed out. My daughter it was a great reader in second grade, and she's going in. And Mrs. Kelly grabbed me one day and she said, "You need to keep reading with her." And I said, "Really?" And my eyes were like, "Yeah, really?" And she's like, "Yes, it's very important you keep reading." And I'm like, "Done. I just needed permission." I thought I was supposed to stop when she started reading by herself.
Yes. I'm so glad. She seems like an amazing teacher. The truth is that, parents and grandparents will always ask me, like, when should I stop reading aloud to my child? And I always say, actually never, because some of my strongest memories of my dad were sitting around the dining room table in high school, when those are the days when, you're kind of ready to leave the table immediately to go do your homework or go out with friends or just go do some other stuff that you want to do. And you are separating from your, that sort of cocoon of home, or maybe, you are struggling to find out where you fit in. And my dad, he would sit there and he would read me the sports pages of the New York Times. And he was actually from Cleveland, so he loved the Cleveland teams, even though they never really did that well, but he loved them. And even to this minute, I can hear his voice and the excitement in his voice about the sports, and excitement to just like he wanted to tell me what was happening in the game the night before. And we got into a real habit with that, where he would just, we'd get to the table, we'd eat our dinner, and then he'd open the paper and read aloud from whatever the headline was and whatever the team was and whatever the game was. And this was, I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. And when you're at those ages, you're going through your own stuff. And I remember at that age when I was 16, my cousin died very, very unexpectedly. And also she was 16. And after this was very traumatic for our family. And I remember, and I was very close with her. And I remember my dad, after a few weeks, obviously, we were dealing with so many things. And then I remember we sat down to the table, and I'll never forget it, because it's just this one night, finally all of us back at the table, and he opened up the paper and he started reading about the Cleveland Browns. And, I'm sure the game didn't end that well, but knowing their record back in those days, but his voice, the sort of soothing, secure nature of his voice in these very, very tumultuous time in my life, it was like as if I was coming home, and it just felt like I could rest for a minute in that voice. And, I was already so old by then. And I mean, that was something my parents always read to us when we were little and then all the way through. And I think, you don't have to be reading a big novel. It doesn't have to be a fancy book. It can be really anything, even a recipe or a comic or something that you like, an article like my dad did, something that interests you. Any of those things, but it's really conveying a lot of love and also mutual learning too. And so I think your daughter's teacher was very wise that the reading together should never end.
Yeah. Pam, you brought up a funny, silly memory of reading at the dinner table. My wife came home and she had a new prescription, and she just handed me the thing, and she goes, "Can you read this? What's this supposed to be?" And so I decided I would read all the possible side effects and the most dramatic and scary voice I could. And me and the kids were just rolling on the floor while my wife was a little bit horrified. That was kind of mean to do, but
It's funny because I feel like reading, when we think about it like as a school-based construct, it becomes a kind of almost like I have to do it. It's going to be hard. I'm probably not going to have a good memory of it. When we think about it in the home and sort of ways that we can like make it meaningful to our kids or make it meaningful to our family, then it can feel a lot more silly, humorous, comforting. And I do think, like, it's something I always say to teachers is try to create and simulate a kind of home-based environment for reading, because the memories that we form around reading aren't always these very serious. It's not always when I was reading, Moby Dick or Anna Karenina. Sometimes it's a very lighthearted or something that makes us laugh, even when it's not, maybe not be funny to someone else or whatever. And I do want people to understand that the reason I read so much is mostly because it relaxes me and gives me pleasure. And I think that's something not to forget with our kids, is like actually make sure you are reading in silly ways with them.
Yeah. So every child a super reader. What a great goal. How do we get there?
Well, I think, in some ways, I think as we've been saying, I think something about this idea of us being role models. And I don't mean that we have to be perfect readers. So anybody who's listening today, you don't have to be, even for yourself. You might say, I'm not a strong reader, or reading is not my favorite thing because I never felt like I was so good at it. Don't worry about that. The main thing about being a role model for your kids as readers, and I mean this for teachers and for parents and grandparents, is to be authentic. So if the kind of reading you like to do is, like I said, might be reading recipes, or it might be you just like to look things up that you like to learn about or things like that, then model that. Make sure that you model that. I actually think it's more important now than ever before because reading is so invisible. It's like, even if I'm looking at my phone, my kid could be thinking I'm playing a game and I could actually be reading something. So make sure your kids know that you're reading something. That's really, really important. And that it's a habit or something that you're doing every day. And even if it's like my husband, he loves maps, so like he loves looking at maps. I consider that part of the reading experience. So if that's what you like to do, show your kids that you like to do that, or even 5 minutes a day, do that with them.
Yeah.
And things like that. And then the other part about raising super readers or teaching super readers is to know a little bit. And again, like, you don't have to be an expert in this, but just even a little bit about how the human brain learns to read. And the reason I say that is because I do think that mostly we think of reading as this mysterious thing that can't be figured out and it just happens like by some miracle. And I do think there is an aspect to reading that is miraculous. It's like completely unknown and unknowable on some level. It's kind of amazing. But we also know a lot about reading too. And just to get a little bit, and that's where my book comes in, just a little bit of knowledge about the fact that when a child is young, it's really helpful for them to, for you to understand that there is a phonics-based approach to this experience that is in the English language, sometimes tricky because a lot of the English language is not phonemic, meaning you can't sound out every word, but it is really, really helpful to actually have your kids play with language as they're growing, and it doesn't have to end when they're done, with second grade, like your daughter's teacher was saying. But that playful approach to teaching phonics, to teaching sounds in words, sounds in language. So Dr. Seuss was a great, brilliant writer because he understood that children love wordplay. They love the sounds of words. My little grandson yesterday was reading The Cat in the Hat. He just thought it was so funny. Now, the stories are very funny, but actually what's really amazing to children is the sounds of words. Cat, fat, hat, mat. To us, that's just ordinary, but to a child, that is the beginnings of phonics. That's the beginnings of the sounds of language. And then the second part of reading is really about meaning. It's about comprehension. So we can't just see language as a series of sounds. We do have to very quickly help our kids put that together. And that, I think, is just helpful for parents to know that those are two things that your child is learning how to do. And sometimes you do those separately, and sometimes you join those together. So you might want to do some word play in the evening before your child goes to bed, do some rhyming with them. And then you also want to read aloud to them from books that they can't read on their own, but you can read to them. And let's say you're reading Frog and Toad, and you're reading because you know that like maybe they've been having a little trouble at recess with a friend, and you can read aloud from Frog and Toad and talk about friendship. You don't have to say to them, I know you're having trouble, but you could say, everybody has moments where it feels hard. And what's great about reading together is we can read Frog and Toad and see what happens when they have a little problem. And that's comprehension. That's actually working with your child on that. So I think even one is being a role model. Two is know a little bit about reading. You don't have to be an expert. You can, but just a little bit to know that helping kids learn the sounds of words and helping them learn how to understand meaning in what they're reading are two things that need to be practiced. And then I'd say the third thing is do not underestimate how important building stamina is. And by that, I mean that a child who's just learning how to read, or an older child, even a teenager who doesn't feel that good about reading, and maybe it's not that they can't sound out the words, and it's not that they don't understand what it means, it's that they just get tired pretty quickly when they're reading. So I always say it's kind of like if I were teaching a kid to play soccer and I saw their kick was awesome, and I saw that when they were running down the field, wow, they run really well. And then they say, I don't want to play soccer. And you're like, well, what do you mean you don't want to play soccer? You're like really good at kicking, and you're really good at running, and you're really good at like wearing that cute t-shirt and all that stuff. Is that it might be just a little too much. He might need a little more water bottle on the field. He might need to run down the field for 2 minutes and not 10 minutes. And the same thing is true for reading. The child loves the sound of words. The child loves to talk to you about characters in the books and the funny characters that, Captain Underpants and Harry Potter and all these funny stories. But actually, the child gets tired, or the teenager gets easily tired. And that's a stamina issue. And that is where, as adults, as parents, we can help with that. One, don't push your child too much at home. When you feel like they're getting tired, take a break. Or have a snack. That always helps. Or find something else that's a little shorter, a little easier to read. And these are things that you as a parent can do at home and teachers can do at school. And even like setting a timer, and don't set the timer for 20 minutes to read at home together, but instead set the timer for something the child can accomplish. So that you could set it for like 7 minutes. Say, you know what, we're going to read together for 7 minutes, and then we're going to have cookies and milk. And so you're ending before the child gets bored or tired. And so I think stamina is really important too. So I think the idea of being a role model, knowing a little something about how children learn to read, and helping them build their stamina, those are 3 awesome ways to go about helping children love to read and learn to read.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought of that stamina, but it's right. There are absolutely times when I'm reading and it's just, the eyes kind of go cross-eyed and, and I'm off to sleep.
Exactly. We all feel that way. I find it sort of funny. Like, I think in education, we're very quick to like tell kids what we think they should do. But when it's us doing it, we're like, just like them, For example, I love reading mysteries and I read them all the time. And if somebody told me, don't read a mystery, you should read a better book or a more important book, that would make me so mad, because I love to read my mysteries. And then the same is true for our children as well, is like if you see them rereading a book, or you see them like loving a comic book, or a book that doesn't seem to be that serious, or they do want to reread a book over and over, don't judge that, because that also raises our super readers, is to say, wow, I'm just like you. I love reading a fast-paced read. Or, hey, I noticed that you like to reread, Goodnight Moon 50 times. Well, that's a really good book. And super readers reread books. And then they start to identify themselves as a super reader, rather than to say, oh, mom thinks I'm kind of a failure because I want to read that book again.
I love that. Yeah, I've been very honest here on the podcast. I made a mistake with my son when he was in middle school and beginning high school. He loved graphic novels. He loved anime and manga. I'd get it for him, and we'd go to the comic store. But every once in a while, I'd go in his room and go, dude, can we do one book without a picture? What do you think? And I didn't appreciate the fact, or I didn't acknowledge the fact that he was reading, and he was reading, literature.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a common thing because we want the best for our kids, and you're always wanting to, I guess my job is I'm supposed to have them strive for something greater, but actually there's a lot of brilliant authors writing in those graphic novels and anime and comics too. I mean, if you actually think about it, magazines or comics books like Superman, all the Marvel stuff, those people are brilliant. I mean, and those stories are actually very archetypal. They're like, I remember I was doing a summer school program with a group of high school students, and I was giving them a kind of synopsis of, I don't know, I think it was the Odyssey maybe. And one of them said, like, wow, that really reminds me of Superman, and I was like, man, yes, like, that's so cool. Like, you could write a master's thesis on that, and because those writers who wrote those Marvel comic books were highly educated people who really felt, that they could transmit some of this really important work into accessible ideas.
Yeah. Pam, the comics were so important. When I was a kid, there was a newspaper strike here in Boston. And so there were no newspapers. The Globe was down, the Herald was down, the Record American was down. They would read the comic strips on the evening news on television because people was like, we got to get our fix of Blondie and, Hagar the Horrible and Superman.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the thing. I feel like when you think about it, the most popular, whether it's the comics like Superman and all the ones that you've just described, and we remember like the radio shows and people, retelling them. And now look how popular these shows are as movies, even to this minute. I think that the funny thing is about reading also is that actually kids have the best taste in books and stories. So, for example, I've just kind of as a related point, one of my most favorite quotes by E.B. White is that when somebody asked him, because he actually wrote for magazines and adult kinds of things. And then he wrote Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little and all these books for Trumpet of the Swan, books for children. So somebody said to him, E.B. White, why do you bother writing for children? You're like an esteemed award-winning author, erudite author. And he said, actually, I don't write for children. They're just the smartest audience I have. And I think that's true. Like, I think that's true of the Marvel comics. I think that's true of Harry Potter. I think that's true of all of these kinds of really epic stories that children understand are really important. And I think before we're quick to say what's a really big book, what's a book that matters compared to some of the things that our kids want to read over and over again, is like maybe to stop ourselves and say, I wonder why that's so riveting to children.
Yeah. And having that conversation with kids, one of the things I've said here on the podcast is when you're asking, when the most important person in that kid's life is saying, I want to know what you think. What are you thinking? We just read that story. What do you think about what the characters did? When you're showing interest, I think that's incredibly empowering. Just letting the kid know, I'm really interested in how you think.
I mean, that right there, what you just said, I mean, that is probably everything. That you are interested in what is happening in their minds. And I think that's the key to super reading, too, with children, is that allow yourself to be an open-ended question asker. Like, I'm interested in you. I'm curious about you. Just like you said, I'm wondering what you're thinking about this, as opposed to, unfortunately, a lot of what happens in the schools is because they think they've got to prepare for the tests. And actually, I think what we're talking about is much better preparation for the test than anything.
Yeah.
But oftentimes teachers are trying to simulate the kinds of questions that will be asked on a test. So it'll be, who is the main character? What is the main idea? What is this character? Where is the setting that this character is? And those are all fine questions, I guess, but they're not that interesting to anybody, especially to the child, because they know that you already have the answer. So they're like, why are you actually asking? But if you ask a question like, I'm wondering what you're thinking, I'm interested in what you're thinking, then they know that you don't have the answer to that. And then they're more motivated to read, and they're more motivated to have complex responses to your question, and also to the book that you're reading. It's like, I've learned more about reading and books from the children I work with than anybody, because they're interesting. Their ideas are endlessly interesting.
Yeah. And when we ask a kid, what do you think? Whatever answer they give you is the right answer. You can't say, no, that's wrong, because
Exactly.
you ask them what they think.
Exactly. And it's such a great question. If that's all you ever did with your kid as a reader, I promise anyone who's listening, you're going to be shocked by how successful they are in school, because they're getting used to you being interested in their big ideas and small ideas. And then they go to school excited to learn, excited, thirsting for knowledge. You've set the stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Boy, there's so much we can talk about, but I love that you are celebrating reading, and you've done so much. Remind us again, you created World Read Aloud Day back in 2015. What's that like 11 years later? How big has that grown?
Oh my gosh, Jed, it is huge. I'm just shocked every year. It's like this amazing thing that happened where I was reading aloud in a classroom to a child, third grader, a whole class of third graders. And after the read aloud, it was Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. And I'll never forget this, because this little guy, he said to me, Mrs. Allyn, I wish we could do that every day. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the read aloud. I wish we could just do that every day. And I said, well, you can, we should, everyone can. And he said, no, I think my teacher thinks that we need to practice for the test, so we don't have time anymore for the read aloud. So I said, but did you know that children who are read aloud to perform better academically than children who are not read aloud to? And he said, you should tell everyone that. He said, when it's my birthday, I always get a lot of attention. He said, we should have a big party for the read aloud, and then people will pay attention to how good it is. And I thought, that is a great idea. So I went home. I told my colleagues, they said, let's just spread the word of it. We made it now it's always the first Wednesday of every February. And the reason for that is because it's this is true. I mean, as far as we can tell, maybe somebody listening is in some country that does not do this, but every country we could find is in school in that first Wednesday in February. So no holidays, everybody's in. So I said, let's do it then when people need a little lift. And so it was it's millions and millions of people celebrate all around the world. And anybody who's listening at litworld.org, you can go there right now and just put your name down, and we'll send you some things to use on World Read Aloud Day and some opportunities to have authors come visit you. It's just awesome. And we've always appreciated you, Jed, for telling people about it, because you guys are I call you the Radvocates, WRAD, World Read Aloud Day Radvocates. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome.
It really is. Hey, Pam, where can people go to find out more about Every Child a Super Reader? And we already know where to go to learn more about World Read Aloud Day.
So for Every Child a Super Reader, great just to come to my website, pamallyn.com, PAMALLYN, and you can take a look at the book there. And also if you go to Scholastic is a great supporter of my work, and they published this book I wrote with Dr. Ernest Morel. He sadly passed away a few months ago, so we will continue this work in his honor and memory. And Scholastic also has other programs that we've created based on this book, such as Lit Camp and other things. So take a look over at scholastic.com.
We've had a really really fun time and an eye-opening time speaking to the author of Every Child a Super Reader and the creator of World Read Aloud Day. Our guest has been Pam Allyn. Pam, thanks so much for being back with us on Reading with Your Kids.
Thanks, Jed.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Fart Boy and Reeky Dog, Dino Doom. Fantastic new graphic novel written by New York Times bestselling author Joan Holub, who's written over 200 amazing books for kids. It's school sleepover at the museum. What could go wrong? Well, how about this? A snack-fueled explosion of garbanzo beans and peanuts unleashes a stink so powerful it brings the dinosaurs back to life. Now, Fart Boy, Reeky Dog, and their friends are in the middle of a dino-sized disaster. They have to solve tricky riddles, find missing bones, and stop the stinkiest villain of all, Professor Gravy Pants. Because if they don't, the dinosaurs could take over. Or worse, they could become Dino Dinner. This action-packed graphic novel is bursting with friendships, adventure, and enough laughs to shake the museum walls. If your kids love superheroes, if they love dinosaurs, and if they love to laugh until they can't breathe, then Fart Boy and Reeky Dog Dino Doom is the book for you. Because sometimes the power to save the world comes from the unlikeliest place. Grab your copy today and get ready for a reading adventure that's truly dynamite. Joining us right now from not too far from our Reedville studios in the beautiful state of Rhode Island, our guest is here today to celebrate her new picture book. Is called A Kid's Book About Boundaries. Please welcome to the show, Ashley Bendixson. Ashley, how are you?
Oh, I'm great, Jed. Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody listening as well. I'm so happy to be here as part of this conversation today.
I think it's a pretty important conversation that we need to have about boundaries, about helping our kids stay safe. Everybody's very comfortable with talking to kids about stranger danger, but the reality is strangers don't pose all that much danger compared to the people that we think are trustworthy.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I mean, in the world of harm, often it is someone we know or an acquaintance. And when it comes to kids being harmed, it very often is someone in their life that they trust, know, should be safe in the presence of. And that's when it gets really tricky and challenging, I think, for parents or caring adults to have those conversations with kids about how do you recognize when those supposed to be safe situations are not.
Yeah. So tell me, how is it? So I made a living doing educational magic shows for over 35 years. And before when I first started, the city of Boston came to me and asked me to create a Say No to Drugs show. And at that time, that was during the whole daycare center abuse period back in the before you were born, back in the 80s. And so I created. So the theme of my Say No to Drugs show was I'm the boss of my body, and that we could do that. We could, deal with saying no to drugs, saying no to alcohol, and also touches and, caring for our bodies. So in creating that show, I did the research, and I, like everybody else, I thought, well, stranger danger, that's what we have to talk about. And then I did the research, and I'm like, oh, wow, no, it's usually a trusted family member or someone close to the family. And so that's what the show was about. And I remember debuting a show in a school outside of Boston, and the principal came up to me afterwards and said, great show, great message. It ain't never going to get booked into another school again because no one wants to hear about that. Are we still at that point? Are people still saying, no, I don't want to hear about this?
I want to say it's a bit of yes and no. I mean, I have spent the last 18 years speaking in schools on the topics of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual harm. but full-time for the last 10 years. So there's enough demand and enough schools and organizations and communities know it's a problem where they want to address it. But there are always still going to be communities that just don't want to discuss it, or they're afraid of the can of worms that might open. But I think that, if anything, we've certainly seen that with the internet and technology and digital devices, the risks are so much higher for kids these days. So I think communities kind of know that they have to address these issues, whether they're comfortable or not. And ultimately, it's to keep kids safe. It's looking at the realities, the data, the amount of kids who are affected by different types of traumatic experiences. So, there's ways to have these conversations. I've always said that, in my work, I've had to learn how to deliver these talks in really empowering ways. And that's knowledge and skills to protect yourself. As you mentioned, kind of knowing I'm in charge of my body. I have power. There's things I can do. So I think it's all about how you approach these topics sometimes to kind of get past those barriers.
Yeah. So tell me, what are we going to experience when we sit down and read a kid's book about boundaries? I'm guessing that this is absolutely a book we want to read with our kids.
Yes. So my book, A Kid's Book About Boundaries, is part of a very popular kids book series called A Kid's Book About fill in the blank. There are hundreds of books on just different topics, and specifically they're designed and laid out and written in a way to be read with a caring adult. So each one almost acts as a script, a narration, kind of a guide for parents, caring adults to sit down and have conversations with their kids about topics that they might not just naturally kind of possess the language for. So it's very much conversational. It is informational, educational, practical. There's practice phrases, what boundaries means. And this is actually written for ages 5 to 9. So it is very kid friendly and, really just brought down into like how boundaries look in their little worlds, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we're kind of over, but I know we went through a period where parents were wanting to bubble wrap their kids. So they didn't experience any losses. We don't keep score at the Little League game, and we don't let the kids scrape their knees and all that other kind of stuff. With this, are you getting feedback from parents like, I don't want my kid to hear about this stuff at age 5 or 7?
I have been very fortunate to not have really any negative response to the book, or even just concerned response to the book. I think I think for one thing, the word boundaries is more commonly used these days. Mm-hmm. And I think that adults alike kind of know that they themselves struggle with setting boundaries and don't want their kids to live through those same experiences or challenges. And I think also something I really emphasize, that this book is not a sexual assault prevention book. It's not just about physical boundaries. It's about emotional boundaries, social boundaries, something as simple as, how do you respond when your closest friend at school makes jokes that make you feel bad about yourself? Like, how do you set boundaries in those situations? So the way I've really marketed this book and written this book is to demonstrate that we have all different kinds of boundaries, and ultimately all this is about is self-advocacy and using your voice, helping kids feel that they can ask for help, express when something feels off, and kind of building that skill young with everyday moments. And then hopefully in the long term, later on in life, if anything challenging did happen or potentially problematic or harmful, they'd already have those innate skills to kind of speak up, use their voice, or talk to someone and ask for help.
Yeah. I think that's so incredibly important. You mentioned devices. I think one of the things, I hope parents are becoming aware of, this little rectangle thing that kids are getting in an earlier and earlier age. It is wonderful because it gives your kids access to the world, but it also gives the world access to your kids. Are parents getting that these days?
I think some do, and I think a lot don't. I think it's, with most things, parents want to believe that, these things couldn't happen to their child, but we live in a world where there's just lots of predatory behavior online, or even just simply being on social media and that impacting a child's self-esteem and constantly comparing themselves to other people. So, I think some parents understand kind of the gravity of what social media and devices can bring into a child's life, but it's tough when, your kid wants a phone because everybody else at school has a phone. It's really a difficult subject to kind of broach as a parent.
Yeah, no, it really is. Tell me this experience. You were sharing with me that you've had quite an eclectic career so far, working with DAs and prosecutors and working in schools. How was it? How did you find the experience of writing a children's book? Was this something that you had always dreamed of doing?
It's not, admittedly. So I've been speaking to students for the last 19 years at the time of this recording, 18, 19 years. And I love speaking to students. And I enjoy taking, again, these complex topics and bringing them down to age-appropriate conversations. And I haven't done much with the elementary space. Most of my work has been middle and high school. But I think one of my convictions is that, early intervention is important. Early conversations are important. And as I've kind of mentioned, we can teach kind of these big, heavy topics in simple ways. Things like consent that we might talk to high schoolers about. We can talk about healthy friendships and boundaries to a 5-year-old. So, I was actually approached with this offer. I have a speaking agent in the education space, and he said, we work with this book company and they're interested in your topic. And I just lit up because instantly I thought, this is powerful, right? To reach a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, to equip them to use their voice, to ask for help, to maybe suddenly feel empowered to tell a parent or an adult about something that has happened already that they maybe have been struggling with, or even to teach kids who maybe don't respect others' boundaries, the importance of that. I just knew that reaching kids young and young as possible is just another way to do that early intervention piece. So I was thrilled with the opportunity, and I had just such a blast writing a book for 5-year-olds.
So tell me, when we open up the book, are we reading a story, or is this more of a guide? Tell me what the experience is going to be like.
Yeah, so it's first person, written by me. I kind of introduce myself. Hi, I'm Ashley. When I was a little kid, I struggled with A, B, and C. Sometimes I felt scared and didn't know how to deal with it. Learning how to use my voice, learning boundaries is what changed the game for me. And then it kind of breaks it down. What are boundaries? If you've never heard this word, let me explain it to you. And I kind of give an example of what boundaries are. And then there's, different types of boundaries. There's pages where there's practice phrases. So, if someone takes your toy without asking, you can say, please ask me first next time. Or if someone, is trying to get you to break a rule or do something you're not comfortable with, you can say, no, thank you. So it really just kind of guides you through, like, what are boundaries? How do we recognize them? What are some ones that make sense to little kids? And then some practice phrases. And kind of as I mentioned, it's one of those books where as a caring adult is reading it with their kid, it kind of does invite conversation, reflection. There's moments to pause. I had a friend of mine who said, my 6-year-old daughter loves it. She couldn't stop telling me stories about her day and how she honored someone's boundaries at school and all about her little life. And I love hearing that, because kids love to talk about their lives. Mm-hmm. So it's very much a conversational book. So yeah, part guide, part storytelling. It's kind of all blended in.
Well, I launched Reading with Your Kids because I know that the relationship I have with my now adult kids was built on a foundation of reading. I was delighted to find out that in addition to that bond, there's so many other benefits that kids get when we read with them. And of course, one of the most important ones is it's the best way to instill values in our kids. Instead of sitting down and saying, you're going to do this and you're going to do, you tell a story and you talk about it. What do you think when the person did this or that? And like you said, your friend saying stories can just, it's like an ignition switch. It just boom, and the conversations are starting.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it builds, trust in relationships. It builds that sense of safety, belonging. There's someone in my life that I can talk to about funny things and light things, but also serious things. Those bonding moments are just so important for kids to have, especially young with their parents, right? For their development and just their view of themselves, others in the world. And, building that trusted relationship is really important.
Yeah. And I'm imagining, too, that families in 2026, if sit down and read a kid's book about boundaries together, are going to have a lot easier time, say 10 years from now, when your kids are in high school and you have to deal with who knows what's going to be going on in 10 years. But right now, the whole where kids are being scammed into sending pictures of themselves, and then they're getting extorted, and all that kind of stuff. Kids are turning to suicide because they can't face the shame. I'm imagining that talking to a kid about a kid's book about boundaries when they're younger. Well, one, they probably won't fall for the scam, but if they do, they'll be much more open to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think, a big reason that I started speaking was honestly because in my own healing, so I went through some challenges in my adolescence. Years later, I just began to ask, why was no one talking about this? Why did I never learn about these issues? Why had I never had these talks with adults in my life to know how to avoid these issues? So I wanted to be on kind of that the forefront of having these conversations, bringing these topics to students. So that was part of it, is just we need to have dialogue around the issues in kids' lives. And then two, I never felt that I had an adult in my life that I could turn to and talk to when something happened. And, I think that having conversations on a regular basis from an early age with those little things, later on, your kid will feel that they are able to come and talk to you. I often tell parents, if your kid's excited about, something at school or something they're drawing or a new video game, even if it means nothing to you and it seems minuscule and unimportant, ask a billion questions, lean in, show curiosity, build that relationship, because then later, hopefully they know that you are a safe space. You're someone that can handle conversations because you've been doing it their whole life. So yeah, I think this book helps kind of do both of those things.
Yeah. I'm curious, where did you, because so many people experienced challenges and people breaking their boundaries throughout their lives, but so a lot of folks just say, okay, I don't want to talk about that. That's in the past, and kind of go on, and that causes issues in their lives. Where did you find the strength to kind of stand up and say, I want to learn more about this, and I want to be an advocate to help people protect themselves?
Yeah, it kind of happened organically for me. I think for me, as I was learning, healing, putting the pieces of my life back together, I was doing lots of reading about abuse and kind of seeing my life in bullet points, to say the least, and kind of, again, feeling that question of, why is no one talking about this? The what if? And so I knew I wanted to get involved in some way, but I didn't think I would be publicly speaking or telling this story out loud. I just researched my local domestic violence agency, kind of asked if I could volunteer. They gave me a chance to just do some basic office work. And then one day they asked me if I would be open to sharing my story at a community vigil. And I was terrified. I mean, it wasn't from an empowered place. It was just coming from a place of, I hope this will help someone if they hear my story. And the feedback was amazing. People from the audience came up and shared their experiences, and, slowly but surely I got these little requests to speak at different small events or after school girls groups or kids programming. And before I knew it, this just became kind of my soapbox cause, and advocacy was something I felt really passionate about. And it was a big piece of my healing. So, I think the strength came from just using my voice, telling my story, feeling validated in it, by sharing it in spaces that were safe and having other people come up and say that they were now seeking help or that this helped validate and confirm their experiences. So yeah, just one interaction at a time, I kind of knew this is important work, and that gave me the strength to want to keep kind of carrying this torch forward.
Well, it certainly is valuable and important work. I'm curious, you just spoke about keeping the torch and moving it forward. It sounds like you had a fun time writing a kid's book about this subject. Did you catch the kid author bug? Are you planning on writing more kids' books in the future?
I'm certainly not opposed to it. I love to write. As much as I love to speak, I love writing. I am a writer. I am a reader. So I would definitely be open to writing more children's books. I have a passion and a dream to write a book for teenagers to kind of supplement my talks when I go into schools. So I'm sure this is just one of many that I'll have as extra resources.
Fantastic. Please tell everybody where they can go to find out more about a kid's book about boundaries, find out more about you.
Sure. So the book is published by Penguin Random House. So that basically means you can pretty much find the book anywhere. All major booksellers, your local bookstore can often order a copy. Your library might have it. I know that it's in many libraries. It's been cool to see the little pings coming in of where the book is. It's, it's all over the globe right now. So you can just search a kid's book about boundaries and that'll pop up. Otherwise, my name, Ashley Bendixson, you can Google that. AshleyBendixson.com is my website, and I have my book information on there. I have a discussion guide that parents can download. You could just download the free discussion guide and have that without the book, and it's a great resource for anyone listening. And then, of course, my work as a speaker for students and educators as well.
And we really encourage folks to go and request the book. Even if you buy your own copy of the book, go to the library, request it, because this is a book that should be available to all kids, I think, all families.
I agree. I think it's an invaluable life skill and, just the skill of self-advocacy, right? Just to know that you have a voice, that you have a say in your life, that you have power, even in situations where you might feel powerless. It's an important life skill. And I think as adults, we all know how much we probably needed that as kids. And hopefully we can now begin to provide that for the young ones in our lives.
We've had a really great time speaking to the author of a kid's book about boundaries. Our guest has been Ashley Bendixson. Hey, Ashley, thanks for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you, Jed.
That's all the time we have for today's episode of Reading with Your Kids. We hope you had fun, and we hope you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. If this episode gave you something to think about or made you smile, please consider sharing a link to the show with someone you love. Leave a 5-star review and, of course, subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. Hey, if you are an author, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com. You'll find a button at the top of the page that says Authors. Click here. Click on that link and you will find out how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all over the world about your fantastic children's book. And imagine being able to say to your friend, especially if you are a debut author or you're a self-published or an indie author, you're struggling, you want to make a name, you want to get out there, you want people to take you seriously. Imagine being able to say that you were on the same podcast that Pam Allyn, the founder of World Read Aloud Day, was on. That's something to brag about. Check it out today, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks today who made today's show so wonderful, starting with Pam Allyn, the founder of World Read Aloud Day. Please be sure to check out Every Child a Super Reader. Also want to thank Ashley Bendixson. Please be sure to check out a kid's book about boundaries. Really, really important that we talk about this subject with our kids. I know, as we say here in Boston, I know it's wicked uncomfortable. You don't want to do it. You don't want to think that anything can happen to your kid. Please, the best way to make sure nothing happens to your kid is to prepare your kid. Give your kid the information, the power, the armor that they need to create boundaries for themselves and to be able to come to you and ask for help whenever they need it. Hey, I also want to thank my team. They're amazing. They helped me put on this episode, this episode, and every episode of Reading with Your Kids. We've had some great team members over the year. Right now, we want to thank Daylene Rose, Adina Lopez, Chris Doherty, Ella Buttier. I want to thank the woman who's been with me from the beginning, from our very first episode back in 2017, more than 2,400 episodes ago, my beautiful wife. Thank you for all the love and joy and support you bring to my life. And of course, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to help your kid become a super reader and help the world become a better, more empathetic place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.